Welcome to Shatter.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. You'll get intimacy when I feel like it, she said. No hesitation, no emotion, just flat, clinical dismissal as she looked down at her phone, thumb scrolling like I hadn't just been gutted in my own kitchen. I stood there for maybe 3 seconds. Didn't speak, didn't move, didn't even breathe. And then something happened I didn't expect. I smiled. Not a bitter smile. Not anger. Clarity. The kind of clarity that doesn't explode, it freezes you solid. Because in that moment, I realized the fight was over. Hell, it had never even started. She wasn't negotiating. She was declaring. And I wasn't a husband anymore. I was background noise. So I walked out. Not angrily. Not in protest. Just done. Quietly done. She didn't follow. That was the part she should have noticed. That night, she climbed into bed like nothing happened. Rolled away from me, like always. Her back had become my home. And the silence between us, my lullaby. I stared at the ceiling, not replaying her words, but everything before them. The slow erosion, the invisible retreat. How her laugh had disappeared. How physical touch had turned into a favor she granted, never a reflex. She'd been saying that sentence for years without the words. Tonight, she just put a period on it. I didn't sleep. Not because I was heartbroken, but because I was calculating. Morning came. I got up first. No coffee for her. No kiss on the forehead. No have a good day. I left the house like a ghost wearing my skin. In the car, engine off, I sat there replaying the last 5 years. Every warning sign. Every arrogant dismissal. Every moment she turned love into leverage. She thought I was too comfortable to leave. Too loyal to detach. Too quiet to be dangerous. She had mistaken my silence for surrender. Now she was about to learn it was preparation. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to slam doors. I was going to remove myself, piece by piece, from her world until she looked around and realized she had nothing left of me. No warnings. No second chances. Just absence. The kind of absence that rearranges the air in a house. The kind that makes someone wonder if they're losing their mind. Because she thought intimacy was hers to give or take. She was about to find out what it feels like when someone takes everything back. And the worst part for her? She wouldn't even see it happening. Until I was already gone. She didn't notice the change on the first day. Maybe not even the second. At breakfast, I sat across from her with my phone in hand, scanning the news. No eye contact. No how'd you sleep. No casual reach across the table like I used to. She spoke about her boss canceling a meeting and some coworkers' birthday plans. I nodded once. No smile. No follow-up. Just a quiet void where my attention used to live. That night, I stayed out after work. Hit the gym, took the long way home. When I walked in, she was on the couch in a silk robe, hair curled, wine poured. Netflix paused on the home screen like she was staging a scene. She said I was late. I said I didn't realize we were on a schedule. The flicker in her eyes told me she felt the shift. It wasn't defiance, it was detachment. Over the next few days, I made no visible moves, but every choice was deliberate. If she cooked dinner, I ate it politely and said thanks, nothing more. If she reached for my hand across the table, I let mine drift back as if I hadn't noticed. No anger, no sighs, just absence, quiet and complete. By the 4th day, she started testing the boundaries. Lipstick before I got home. Candles lit at dinner. Small touches she hadn't offered in months. I didn't reject them with hostility. I simply let them fall flat, like water on stone. When she asked how my day was, I said, good. When she texted miss you, I replied, all good here. Precision responses. Surgical. Each word trimmed of warmth. The truth is, she had built her control on one thing. My constant effort to close the gap she created. Withholding affection had been her silent weapon. Now I was using silence against her. And it was working. She didn't know how to live without being pursued. By the end of the week, the tension was thick enough to taste. I began making small financial moves. Closing subscriptions she didn't even realize I paid for. Rerouting a percentage of my paycheck to a private account. Nothing she'd notice yet. But the foundation was shifting. Quietly, I was moving my life into a place where she no longer had access. She started watching me more closely, studying my routines like she was looking for cracks. I gave her none. No explanations, No sudden bursts of emotion she could grab onto. I was polite, calm, and utterly unreachable. And I could feel it happening. The power she thought she had was starting to slide out of her hands. Not with a crash, but like sand through an open fist. The kind of loss you only notice when it's too late. Because this wasn't about winning her back. This was about erasing her claim to me, piece by silent piece, until I was nothing but a ghost she couldn't touch. And she was starting to realize the haunting had already begun. I knew the exact moment the unease turned into panic. It wasn't loud or dramatic. No screaming, no tears. Just a shift, subtle, but sharp enough to feel. She called me at work in the middle of the day, something she never did unless it was urgent. Her voice had that light, artificial tone people use when they're masking something. She said she just wanted to hear my voice. I didn't return the sentiment. Instead, I let a few seconds of silence hang until she filled it with a nervous laugh and an excuse to hang up. That was the first crack. Not because she missed me, but because she was testing the leash she thought she still had on me. And it went slack in her hands. That night, I came home even later. No explanation. She was waiting in the living room in a dress I hadn't seen in years, like we had plans. We didn't. She suggested trying a new restaurant. I told her I'd already eaten. Watching the mask slip on her face was like seeing a mirror fog over, brief, but telling. Within days, her efforts escalated. More makeup. Longer conversations she tried to start, and I didn't engage in. Little touches that once would have pulled me in, now deflected with casual indifference. When she sent "Hope your day's going well" in the middle of a work afternoon, I replied with "busy." When she wrote "miss you," I sent "all good here." Every response was measured. No emotion for her to feed on. And it rattled her, because she'd spent years holding the upper hand through selective affection and calculated withdrawal. Now the roles were reversed. She was the one chasing clarity that never came. I made another financial move that week, one she wouldn't see until much later. I rerouted my direct deposit, so part of my income landed in a separate account. Clean. Private. Mine. I also started canceling services she didn't know were in my name. The first casualty was a streaming subscription. She found out when she tried to log in and failed. She made a point of sighing loudly from the couch, waiting for me to fix it. I didn't. The next evening, I saw her looking through my laundry, pretending to fold shirts that didn't need folding, fingers brushing over receipts in my pockets. I said nothing. Let her wonder. This wasn't revenge. It was exposure. Letting her see, in slow motion, that the man she assumed would orbit her forever had already left the atmosphere. And I stayed silent because silence was the sharpest edge I could give her. Words could be twisted, argued with, diminished. But absence is undeniable. The truth was simple. I no longer wanted her to feel secure in my presence. I wanted her to feel the uncertainty I had lived in for years. The kind that makes you check your phone more than you should, just to see if the person you took for granted still exists in your world. Soon, she would learn that I did still exist, just not for her. I didn't expect to find anything that night. But habits change when trust dies. She'd left her phone charging on the kitchen counter while she showered. That alone was unusual. Normally, the thing was glued to her hand. I wasn't looking for trouble, but I noticed the screen light up with a notification. Not a name I recognized. Just an initial and a heart emoji. I didn't open it. Didn't need to. Because the second I saw it, I felt that stillness. The same cold clarity I'd felt the night she told me intimacy was on her schedule. Proof didn't have to be loud to be conclusive. When she came downstairs, she acted like nothing was out of place. Hair wrapped in a towel, wearing one of my old shirts like she was suddenly sentimental. She moved around the kitchen, casual, humming a song I'd never heard her listen to before. She didn't notice my eyes on her. I kept my distance. Said nothing. I wanted her to think I was still operating in the dark. People make more mistakes when they believe they're undiscovered. Over the next few days, her patterns shifted in small, telling ways. She guarded her phone more closely. Started running errands after dinner. Wore perfume at 9 p.m. to go grab groceries. I let it all pass without comment. Not because I was blind, but because I was documenting. Every inconsistency was a brick in the wall I was building between us. I began aligning my exit quietly. I backed up important files from our shared devices. moved certain valuables into a storage unit she didn't know about, adjusted account permissions. Nothing visible enough to trigger alarm, but enough to ensure that when I finally walked, I'd leave nothing behind. She, on the other hand, was unraveling in the silence. She'd initiate conversations just to hear my voice, testing for signs of jealousy, asking if I'd noticed her new hair, her new dress. I gave polite acknowledgments and returned to whatever I was doing. No spark, no fight, just indifference. One night, she came home late, carrying takeout for one. She sat across from me at the table, picking at her food, eyes darting between me and her phone. Finally, she asked if I wanted to do something together this weekend. I said I already had plans. I didn't elaborate. Her fork paused midair. That was when I saw it, the first real fracture in her composure. Not just irritation, fear. The realization that the control she thought was unshakable was slipping away, and she couldn't stop it. But I didn't press the advantage yet. Timing was everything. She still believed she had the option to explain herself, to charm her way back into my good graces when she was ready. She didn't know that by the time she tried, I'd be gone in every way that mattered. Desperation has a scent. It's faint at first, almost sweet, but it sharpens quickly, like metal in the air before a storm. By the start of the next week, it was thick around her. She started remembering old traditions, like making pancakes on Sunday morning, even though she hadn't done that in over a year. She dug out the blanket we used to share for movie nights and draped it over the couch, pretending it had just been lying there. When she talked, her words were wrapped in a forced lightness, but her eyes kept searching my face for something. Approval, warmth, anything. I gave her nothing. Each gesture felt less like affection and more like reconnaissance. She was trying to map my emotional state, looking for an entry point. I knew better than to give her one. The more she reached, the more I became an unmovable wall. By midweek, her approach changed. She began manufacturing small crises as excuses to involve me. The Wi-Fi's not working. The garbage disposal's making a weird noise. I think there's something wrong with my car. Problems she could have solved herself, but now presented like invitations. I treated them as exactly what they were, noise. If it was my responsibility, I handled it wordlessly, without eye contact, without lingering in the room afterward. If it wasn't, I told her she could figure it out. That last one hit harder than I expected. The look on her face said it plainly. She wasn't used to hearing me say no. That Thursday, I came home to find her waiting at the kitchen island, wearing the dress she wore on our first anniversary. It fit differently now, but she still carried it like a weapon. She asked if I remembered the night she first wore it. I told her I did, and then I walked past her to make myself dinner. She followed me into the kitchen, leaning against the counter. She said we'd been off lately, and maybe we just needed to reconnect. I kept my back to her as I replied, "I'm good." She tried to turn it into a laugh, but her voice cracked on the edges. That was when I knew she was losing control of the story in her head. The one where she decided when we drifted and when we came back together. My silence wasn't just confusing her anymore. It was scaring her. And fear makes people sloppy. I could feel the mistakes coming. She would try too hard, push too far. And in doing so, she would hand me everything I needed to make my exit clean. Until then, I stayed the course. No arguments. No dramatic reveals. Just the steady removal of myself from her world, one quiet act at a time. Because she still thought she had time. And I knew she didn't. It happened on a Saturday night. I'd been out most of the day, running errands that didn't need to take that long. When I came home, she was on the couch, phone in hand, wearing that same forced smile she'd been practicing all week. She asked how my day was. I told her it was fine. I didn't sit down. She kept glancing at her phone between sentences. At first, I thought she was just distracted. Then she laughed, soft, under her breath, at something she was reading. Not the kind of laugh you give a friend. The kind you save for someone who makes you feel like you're getting away with something. I walked into the kitchen, silent. She didn't realize she'd left the reflection of her phone screen visible in the dark glass of the cabinet. Just enough for me to see a name, one I'd never heard before, and a string of messages that didn't belong in a marriage. Compliments. Late-night plans. Inside jokes. I didn't confront her. Not then. I just filed it away, another piece of the puzzle sliding into place. Proof wasn't for arguments. Proof was for timing. The rest of the evening, I acted as if nothing had changed. We ate in silence. I cleaned my plate, rinsed it, left hers in the sink. She kept checking her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. Later, she told me she was going to bed early. 10 minutes after she disappeared upstairs, I heard the faint sound of her voice. Low, hushed, careful. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, just listening. The words didn't matter as much as the tone. Warm, engaged, the exact opposite of the way she spoke to me. When I finally went up, the light under the bedroom door was out. She was asleep, phone face down on the nightstand. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. My focus wasn't on catching her. It was on preparing my exit so precisely that she wouldn't see it coming until I was already gone. That week, I accelerated my plans. I finalized the transfer of my personal savings, removed my name from any account or subscription tied exclusively to her, collected important documents, and stored them in my car. I even boxed up a few things she wouldn't notice were missing, taking them to the storage unit. All of it, silent, invisible. She, meanwhile, had grown bolder. More late nights, out with friends. More guarded phone calls in the other room. But every time she looked at me, I could see the question in her eyes. Why isn't he reacting? She wanted a confrontation, because a fight would mean I still cared enough to engage. My indifference was the one thing she couldn't strategize against. By the end of the week, she made her first real slip. She left her phone on the counter while she went to the laundry room. A message popped up, preview clear as day. Can't wait to see you again tonight. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just turned away, poured myself a drink, and waited. Because now, the game was over. The rest was just execution. Once you have confirmation, the rest becomes mechanical. Every move has purpose. Every word, if you speak at all, is chosen with the precision of someone who's already past caring. I didn't need to rush. The quiet dismantling of a shared life works best when it's done slowly, giving the other person time to notice, but never enough time to stop it. I began spending more nights away from the house. Not lying about it, just not explaining. Out was all I ever said. If she asked where, I answered with nowhere important and walked away. The less detail I gave, the more her mind scrambled to fill in the blanks. I also started removing my presence from the home in ways she couldn't quite pinpoint. A jacket missing from the closet. My favorite mug gone from the kitchen. Books that once sat on my nightstand now empty space. She noticed, I could tell. But she didn't ask. Asking would mean acknowledging she felt the loss. Her behavior shifted again. The late-night phone calls grew shorter, the laughter more forced. She made small, clumsy attempts to reclaim the closeness she'd ignored for years. A hand on my arm as I passed by, suggesting we get away for the weekend. Cooking my favorite meal and pretending it was spontaneous. I responded with politeness, not warmth. I thanked her for dinner, but didn't linger at the table. I acknowledged the suggestion to travel, but didn't commit. Each time, her smile faltered just enough to reveal the panic underneath. Meanwhile, I finalized the last details. The storage unit was full enough to hold everything I cared to take. My accounts were separated, my direct deposit entirely rerouted. The important documents were already in my car, sealed in an envelope. I even changed my phone's lock screen, not to something suspicious, but to a neutral image. It was a signal to myself more than to her. This chapter was closing. The silence between us became almost physical. We moved around each other like strangers in the same waiting room, sharing air, but nothing else. She was feeling it now, the void she'd once created on her terms, but couldn't control when it turned back on her. Late one evening, I caught her watching me from across the room, eyes narrowed as if trying to read a language she used to speak fluently, but had forgotten. She asked if something was wrong. I told her, everything's fine, and it was just not for her. Because at that point, there was nothing left to decide. The exit was ready. The only thing left was to choose the moment. And I knew exactly when it would come. The day I chose wasn't special. No anniversary. No fight. No visible reason to anyone but me. That was the point. Leaving in silence isn't about theatrics. It's about precision. I woke earlier than usual. Sat at the edge of the bed for a moment, just watching her sleep. Her phone was on the nightstand, face down, as always. I didn't reach for it. I'd stopped needing answers. I made coffee for one. Ate breakfast alone at the kitchen counter. The house was still, but my mind was already elsewhere, on the storage unit, on the envelope in my car, on the next address that would never be hers. She came downstairs in her robe, yawning, pretending not to notice my packed gym bag by the door. She asked if I'd be home for dinner. I said, probably not, without looking up from my mug. Her nod was small, but I caught the flicker in her eyes. She felt it, even if she didn't know what it was. By mid-morning, I had already moved the last of what I wanted. Clothes, keepsakes, a few framed photos I hadn't looked at in years. Nothing excessive. The trick was to make the space look lived in until the very last second. The rest of the day, I followed my routine. Went to the gym, grabbed a coffee after, sat in my car for a while, just letting the minutes stretch. I thought about all the conversations we didn't have, the arguments I didn't waste breath on, the years I tried to close a distance she was busy expanding. When I finally drove back, she was in the living room, laptop open, pretending to work. She didn't look up as I passed. I went upstairs, showered, and changed, not into pajamas, but into jeans and a clean shirt. She asked where I was going. I told her I had something to take care of. That was it. No further detail. I walked out with my gym bag, locked the door behind me, and didn't look back. There was no dramatic goodbye, no note on the counter. Just absence. At the storage unit, I stood for a moment, taking in the small space that now held my life in boxes. It wasn't freedom yet, but it was the first breath of it. I checked into a short-term rental that night. Plain, quiet, anonymous. I turned my phone face down on the table and left it there. I knew she'd text, maybe call. She'd want to know where I was, when I'd be back, why I hadn't said anything. But silence answers questions better than words ever could. Because she'd built her confidence on the idea that I'd never walk away without warning. And now, warning was the one thing she didn't get. She didn't notice right away. That's the thing about silence. You can mistake it for routine if you want to. The first day I didn't come home, she probably assumed I was out late. The second day, she might have convinced herself I was giving her space. But by the third, the tone of her messages shifted. The first few were light. Hope your day's going well. Dinner's here if you're hungry. Then came the shorter ones. Where are you? Call me. Followed by the long ones. The ones that read like monologues in search of an audience. I read every word and answered none. I imagined her pacing the living room, checking the driveway, glancing at her phone every few minutes. She'd walk into the bedroom and see the gaps. My favorite jacket missing, the drawer where I kept my watch empty. Little absences that didn't scream, but whispered. On the fourth day, she called. Once, twice, 6 times in a row. I let them ring out. When she finally stopped, I could almost feel the weight of her silence pressing against mine. That night, she sent a single message. We need to talk. I didn't reply. While she was unraveling, I was settling into the calm of my new space. No footsteps in the hall, no second toothbrush next to mine, no undercurrent of tension humming through every room. I cooked what I wanted, slept when I wanted, and woke without the heaviness that had lived in my chest for years. By the end of the week, her messages changed again. No more demands. No more casual pretense. Just fragments. I'm sorry. Please call me. We can fix this. I left them all unread. I knew exactly what she was feeling. The absence she thought she wanted had turned on her. She'd built our marriage into a game of withholding and reward, assuming I'd always fight to win back what she dangled just out of reach. But when the other player walks off the board, the game ends. I wasn't coming back to explain myself. She didn't deserve the courtesy. Explanations give closure, and closure is a gift. I wanted her to live in the echo of her own decisions, to replay every cold glance, every dismissive word, every calculated withdrawal, and wonder which one finally pushed me past the point of return. By the 10th day, she stopped texting, not because she'd moved on, but because she'd realized the truth. I wasn't ignoring her. I was gone. That's the moment I'd been waiting for. Not her panic, not her guilt, her understanding. Because once she understood, there was nothing left for either of us to say. It took 12 days for her to show up in person. I heard the knock before I saw her through the window. Same coat she wore last winter, hair pulled back, no makeup. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, but in the way someone does when they're carrying something they can't set down. I opened the door, but didn't step aside. She said my name like it was both a question and a plea. I didn't answer. She asked if we could talk. I told her she had 3 minutes. She launched into it fast, apologies mixed with explanations, sprinkled with the same justifications I'd heard in other forms for years. She said things had been complicated, that she didn't realize how far we drifted, that we could start fresh. Her voice shook in places, but there was still calculation behind it, like she believed the right sequence of words could turn the lock. I let her speak, not because I wanted to hear it, but because silence is heavier when it follows a flood of words. When she finally stopped, waiting for my reaction, I could see it in her eyes, the flicker of hope that I might step aside, invite her in, give her proof that she still had a foothold in my life. Instead, I gave her the only truth left between us. I didn't disappear, I said. I just stopped being here for you. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I didn't fill the space. I let the quiet stretch until it became a wall she couldn't climb. Then I closed the door. Not slammed. Just a steady, deliberate close that didn't leave room for her hand or her words. I stood there for a moment on the other side, listening. She didn't knock again. I heard her footsteps retreat, slow at first, then faster as she reached the street. When I finally turned away, there was no rush of victory, no satisfaction in her defeat. Just the clean stillness of knowing the weight was gone. Back in the kitchen, I poured myself a drink and sat at the table. Outside, the evening was quiet. Inside, it was quieter still. She would replay that moment, I knew. She'd try to decide if she could have said something different, done something sooner, offered more, or asked for less. But the truth would settle eventually. The moment wasn't about what she did wrong. It was about what I no longer needed to make right. And that's the part she'd never forgive herself for, realizing I'd built a life without her in it, while she was still standing at the door. The game was over. The board was empty, and I wasn't coming back to play. Real men don't explode. They exit. Subscribe for more power stories.